Out of all the genres of anime, there are none that I tried hard to get into more than the Isekai genre. My struggles with understanding it have made me think about why that might be the case. It isn't really the concept that is flawed, but probably generally lies within the series themselves. And to those who don't really know what an Isekai is, it's a story where a character gets transported to a different world. It's usually a fantasy world where the main character gets transported some kind of way, there usually by death. And there's also cases of a reverse Isekai where the opposite happens. A character from a fantasy world gets resurrected into our world. In this video I would like to present a variety of points explaining why the anime in this genre are such favorites. And the main reason why I believe so has to do with the following arguments. Isekais fail in using its concept to its full potential. A series such as Re:Zero fails in this regard, as it has no reason to be in the genre really. What's the point of a series being an Isekai if it doesn't have the characters reflect on their past? During season 1, we aren't really giving any info about Subaru's real life. We don't know anything about his parents until much later in the story. On the other side, we have Mushoku Tensei, an Isekai where the main character regrets the actions of his past self and uses his new opportunity to start a better life. But the past never leaves him, it haunts him even after his reincarnation. So here you can see an Isekai where it still affects the character long after the transportation. My second point is an Isekai should use tokens from the other side as reference points. This way you can create elements that are constructed outside of the Isekai world and show up again in the real world. An anime that takes advantage of this technique brilliantly is Fate. Being a reverse Isekai, it uses the fact that the Isekai characters have relations to objects that relate to other characters. The series does this with small dialogue. Design choices and the servants' weapons. Rewarding keen viewers that have knowledge about these historical figures, which makes the references smart and fun. For example, in Fate Zero, the viewer is able to discover Berserker's identity long before it's revealed through hints shown in the series, like in the first ending, for example. This is only possible in an Isekai scenario through the elements of predetermined knowledge. The same effect happens when Ryder uses his noble phantasm, and you can see the entirety of Alexander's armies. It's a eureka moment for attentive viewers when you recognize the soldiers presented just from small designs. And because the anime never tells you who they are, it's a treat for those who know. The most common complaint about Isekai anime is usually that its tendency to be a power fantasy with senseless, overpowered protagonists. Sword Online being a beaten horse at this point, but about its many flaws, but it's just a perfect candidate for a ballet-ridden Isekai. We know next to nothing about Kirito's family except for his sister, who gets introduced in the second half of the story long after he's already escaped the game. There's next to no turmoil other than being trapped in the game outside of a few moments, most of those in the beginning. Kirito being a completely empty character with very little depth is an issue with many, as it never feels like he has earned any of his victories. If you take every point I made so far, and consider SEO to be an offender of said points, then it begs the question, what series is the best Isekai? Drifters, a manga made by Kota Hirano, the creator of Hellsing, made into an anime by Studio Madhouse. A series about historical figures being transported to a classical high fantasy world with the objective to do whatever they want. And the first reason why it succeeds so perfectly is so it mixes the two genres of Isekai. A normal Isekai and a reverse Isekai. There's no normal world that's simply there for the first 5 minutes either, only to be glossed over, just like in Re:Zero. It isn't like Fate either, in the aspect that it can be quite historically inaccurate. Instead, it's honest with its characters. picking those throughout time that have died in mysterious ways to be the Isekai victims, making it slightly more believable that they are there in the first place. Drifters take a clever approach to minimize the problem of having overpowered characters by making their opponents also be characters that are transported from another world, as well as making them equally strong and special. Knowing who the characters are beforehand isn't necessary, but it makes the multiple references very satisfying in nature. They use tactics and strategies that they experience in some way. This is demonstrated through the character Oda Nobunaga. Nobunaga was a general and daimyo during the Sengoku Dai period of Japan, a period filled with conflicts. He was famous for being one of the first who effectively incorporated the muskets into his army, so it is only fitting that the Nobunaga in Drifters has a fixation in recreating that. He carries around a small flintlock gun and looks for someone that can make a replica. This also makes it so satisfying when he finally gets to use his guns, so he can perform a Japanese musket volley onto his enemies. He also uses the corpses of said enemies and turns them into gunpowder through the help of decomposition, which was used against him by the Iki monks during Nobunaga's real life. Another example will be of Shimatsu Toyahisa, who died trying to get ahead of an enemy general, so whenever he kills someone in this world, he does it by cutting off their heads. Every single isekai character, or drifter as they're called within the series, all have these moments where they act according to their past actions. And the most smart way Drifter does this is with two characters, Jakata Tochisu and the main character Shimatsu Toyahisa. But first, a little history lesson. Tochisu was a Shinsenkumi during the Meiji Restoration and opposed the Shimatsu clan, who later on killed Tochisu in battle. And they restored the emperor to power and ruined everything Tochisu had worked on. The moment this character enters the show, and if you have the pre-existing knowledge of their past, you can figure out this entire plotline long before it happens. Then you realize intelligent use of the potential that Isekai gives. As these two legendary sword fighters would in no way meet in real life, Toyahisa, our protagonist, and Tochisu still have a deep connection to each other through family, despite living almost 300 years apart from each other. Family is a prominent theme within Drifters. Toyahisa constantly goes on about how he's so proud to be a Shimatsu and how good sword fighters they are, or how he fights in the Shimatsu clan way. Nasuno Yuichi laments over his own brother's terrible actions, and Oda Nobunaga reflects on his own tendency to betray people and his vulnerable relationship with others, especially his son. It is truly fitting, isn't it, that each of our protagonists have another isekai character that represents their past life. Toyahisa must meet the aforementioned Toshisu, Yuichi must meet his oldest brother, and Nobunaga must face the man who killed him. The past being the most important theme of the series. Characters' past is brought up again throughout not only the rivals but through some events similar to their own life. Usually something aligned to trauma or regret. The drifters get a second chance into bettering themselves and not making the same mistakes again. Nobunaga is a manipulated person, constantly tricking people and using them for his own goals, which also leads to him not trusting others either. But something changes when Toyasha tells him about his son, Oda Nobukatsu. Nobunaga had suspected his son of assassinating him, and when he found out that his son instead fought to the death trying to protect Nobunaga, he broke down. Nobunaga became self-conscious about how terrible of a person he truly was, and decided to change his ways. By seeing his son in Toyahisa, he is giving a chance to face his past trauma and better himself. He accomplishes this by giving away his leadership role to Toyahisa, stating that someone that can't trust his own family can't be a leader. This way, thematically giving closure to his family situation. Another great character done well through their past is the main antagonist, the Black King. But to truly explain this character fully, I have to talk about spoilers and ruin one of the greatest twists in anime. So skip this part of the video if you want to avoid said spoilers. So basically, we figure out that the drifters have been summoned by this godlike character called Murasaki. Murasaki, who is the Japanese classical author Murasaki Shikibu. He created a fantasy world as one of his stories, but another character, Ise, wants to destroy the world that Murasaki had created. So she sends people from our world who have died with regret and hatred, called the Ents. They have the order to kill all humans, while being led by the mysterious Black King. With Murasaki wanting to protect the stories he had created, he also summons warriors and generals who died. These are the Drifters. But something is off with the Black King. Despite advocating for the death of all humans, he teaches the monsters races that he becomes a leader of multiple skills such as agriculture, education and infrastructure. Most of the Ents' power are there to destroy. Jan the Arc's fire and Anastasia Nikolovna's ice storms comes to mind. But Black King is something different. He's able to heal the wounds of his allies and create bread and fish out of nothing. Observant viewers will also be able to notice the holes in his hands and his white robes and his locust staff and his introduction episode being called Baba Yeti. And then it hits you. The main antagonist of Drifters is the son of Joseph and the Virgin Mary, Jesus Christ. To the other side of the conflict, the human race's main player is the Orte Empire, created by a drifter by the name of Cardota, a sizable empire and enslaved all non-humans. The humans also don't really act that well to the enslaved races either, forcing many of them into labor camps or serfdom. One of the first scenes of the series is some human soldiers slaughtering elf serfs for not behaving as they wanted to do. Jesus, who died for the sins of humanity, now seeing how they never learned anything and still act terribly, led Jesus to give up hope on humanity, aiming to create a new future for another race who will mold into a being better. On the other hand, our product trio unites the elves against the humans, fighting for their freedom and also along the way to free other enslaved races, like the dwarves who in the past were long-term enemies of said elves. But the drifters inspired them to be better, to change and together put aside their past and differences and help each other.
All the other bunkhouses are like this one, filled to the brim with dying captives. Even after we elves surrendered to the Orta, the dwarves kept resisting their invasion. Now we see the fate of those who refused to bend. Life as a slave in the mines of the forge.
It sounds like our captors have met a messy end. Didn't think elves had the stones. Ironic, don't you think, that you of all people would come to rescue us?
We were in a bad way, but they came to our aid. The Drifters.
I don't care who did it, just that they did. Please, let us out of here. I beg of you, free us. I know that you elves think we're little better than beasts, but we'll give them hell, even weakened as we are.
All right, then.
Huh?
I've heard much of you dwarves. Your beard is incredible. You're shorter than expected. Thought you'd be stockier, too.
Tell me true. Are you one of those drifters they speak of?
That's what they call me, but I don't give a damn about distinctions like that. An army marches on its stomach. With that in mind, let's eat!
The drifters themselves represent the idea of change, that you can become a better person, that you can help others to change for the better. The past may never leave you, but it doesn't mean you should run from it. They will have to prove this to none other than Jesus Christ himself, a man filled with regrets and hatred. And this is why Drifters is the best Isekai. Well, adding to this, I listened to some of the Drifters OST, and you should see she really took this one home. Good job. So buy the soundtrack. Also, I rediscovered that the reason I watched SAO back in 2012 is because of this top 5 overpowered anime protagonists video. Just fun nostalgia trip down there.